Welcome to the 2020 New Testament Challenge. Today we're in Luke chapter 16. As we start chapter 16, we begin with a parable. It's the parable of a shrewd manager. There was a rich man who had a manager who was accused of wasting his possessions. So he called him in and asked him, "What is it that I hear that you've been doing? Give an account of your management, because you cannot be manager any longer." This man is about to lose his job. Why? Because he has been cheating. He's been charging people too much. So before this meeting of his accountability takes place, the manager calls all the people that owe his master money in. He says, "Take out your bill. Whatever you owe, let's cut that. Let's take some of that off." Obviously, they were still paying the master back what they owed him, but the portion that the manager was tacking on top, he was erasing. When the master brought the manager in, he saw what he had done, and he said that he was very shrewd. In verse 8, we read, "The master commended the dishonest manager because he had acted shrewdly. For the people of this world are more shrewd in dealing with their own kind than the people of light." Then Jesus said this in verse 9, "I tell you the truth, use worldly wealth to gain friends for yourselves, so that when it is gone, you will be welcomed into eternal dwellings." What is Jesus saying? Money is just a tool. It's neither good nor bad, but how we deal with money, that is what we have to look at. In other words, our attitude about money can either free us or it can put us into bondage. If we feel as though money is our all in all, then we're going to lose out on what God really wants that money to do in our lives. Money is not only a tool, but it's also a test. What are we going to do with what we've been given? Are we going to be faithful with it? Are we going to see it as it really is? Or are we going to put more value on it than it really should have? Let's continue reading. In verse 10, Jesus said, "Whoever can be trusted with very little will also be trusted with much. But whoever has been dishonest with a little, he will be dishonest with much." Jesus is saying God is watching what we do with what we have. But notice then what Jesus says in verse 11. "So, if you have not been trustworthy in handling worldly wealth, who will give you true riches?" God is saying that he is watching what we do with worldly wealth. Now, there are spiritual things that are tied to how we deal with physical things. If we are not dealing with physical things correctly, then God says, "I'm not going to trust you with eternal things." God's word and people are eternal. Those are the only two things in this world that are. So if we are not dealing with money correctly, worldly possessions, then God is saying, "I'm not going to trust you with those things that last forever." If we want to have an impact in people's lives, if we want God to be able to trust us with more in how we affect other people's lives, we need to deal with worldly things correctly. So then he says, "And if you have not been trustworthy with someone else's property, who will give you property of your own? No servant can serve two masters. He will either love the one and hate the other, or he will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money." This is a very sobering parable that Jesus is giving, but the implication is very real that we need to take to heart. We need to put money in its proper place. It's just a tool, but it's also a test. God is watching what we do. If money is what we live for, we're not going to be given true riches. If money is seen as something we can use to bless others, then God will give us more. If we're trustworthy with little, God will give us more. God is looking for faithfulness. And he actually is saying, if we are faithful here, then he can trust us to go to a new level with him. But if we're not faithful here, then we're not going to experience new blessings here. Therefore, if we want to go to a higher level, experience God in brand new ways, we need to be faithful first with what we've been given. I want to be faithful. Thank you for joining the 2020 New Testament Challenge.